Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Polyakov, and I run customer solutions at DBOS. Today, I'm excited to chat with Cameron Spiller, who is the CTO of Soria Analytics. Soria is the Bloomberg terminal for healthcare services data, allowing investors and industry professionals to understand the market without having to do the grunt work of scraping, cleaning, and monitoring the data themselves. Today, we'll discuss how Soria uses DBOS Transact for Python and DBOS Cloud. So, without further ado, Cameron, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about what Soria is?
Hi. Nice to talk with you again, Alex. I'm, as Alex said, this CTO of Soria. At Soria, we're making it really easy for investors to understand how the healthcare market works without them having to do a lot of really annoying work. There's a lot of different disparate data sets across the government that are available that are very difficult to make sense of. And with our industry expertise, we're able to gather that information and identify the useful sources, clean it up, historically merge it. And then on top of that layer of clean data, make analyses available to customers that only an industry expert would be able to put together.
How did you guys come up with the concept? What made you get into this field?
Yeah. So my co-founder, who was a childhood friend of mine, previously worked as an equity researcher for 7 years at Bank of America, and he, as towards the end, really kind of like understood why am I constantly updating tons of different Excel sheets with disparate sources of government information in order to answer questions that people are redundantly asking clients of his because he was effectively an advisor to and consultant to hedge funds. So what we've been able to do is kind of like break down those redundant steps and set up permanent infrastructure around a lot of those government sources so that when they come out, we know we no longer have to go and update an Excel sheet, read a CSV, figure out the different column names and how they've changed over time, or the page of a PDF that it may have been on one year versus another. We handle all of that.
Hmm. Okay. And do you have a demo you can show us?
I do. I do have a demo. So, in terms of our demo right now, what we're delivering to customers is ultimately a way for them to see expert analyses as well as the underlying data cleaned and available without them having to do it themselves. So, kind of to take a look at one of those kind of like analyses that we make available to customers, we're going to take a look at this Medicare Advantage enrollment workbook. And these are analyses that my co founder, who's an expert in this field, has put together. But what's neat is it's on top of information that is difficult to wrangle and difficult to clean, especially as different companies buy each other over time. It's even hard to keep track of who owns what. But as you can see here, we have different graphs kind of showing information about, in this case, the enrollment of folks in Medicare over time. You can filter to specific companies and see how that has changed over time. For instance, looking at United Health Group, and it's all very clear and easy, and you don't have to do any manual Excel work, which is pretty amazing as well. And we have different analyses available across all of these different workbooks that are also really only applicable to experts. So while I may not understand why the information is useful, we are able to do a lot of grunt work that they would have had to do themselves. Um,
I see. So it sounds like you're doing an end-to-end data solution. So it starts with pulling this data from government sources. Do you store a copy as well? It looks like
yeah,
this.
so we're storing a copy, and we have a lot of internal tools on our end to wrangle and historically unify that information. So as an example, there may have been 3 or 4 teams over the past 20 years that this data has been released, working on making it available to the public, but the column names may have changed, new laws may have come out, causing new columns to be added that indicate
Mm.
reporting of specific information. And only an expert is really familiar with what all those columns mean, how those name changes over time map. And then on top of that, the end to end of the analysis and the data cleaning, how that data needs to be cleaned. So, something that we do in addition to all of that data wrangling is we have to figure out what companies owned what over time. And that's a pretty difficult problem given there are thousands of subsidiaries. I think there's like 6,000 subsidiaries that United Healthcare has.
Mm.
We're managing that going back historically. So we know the companies that existed at the time, but then no longer sort of exist, but now exist as a subsidiary of United Healthcare. And that's just kind of one piece of that data cleaning process.
Wow. And do you happen to know how many distinct data sources you have in here?
Yeah. So at the moment, we have around 300 distinct data sources that compile up to around 70 different analyses. So we're doing a lot of cross data set joins of information in order to kind of deliver the maximum value to clients.
A lot of diversity. That's incredible. Let's talk about how DBOS fits in the picture. Clearly there's a lot of moving pieces, and I know from working with you, you've been using Transact and Cloud for what's it been, a few months now for sure, over half a year, I think, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Since around December.
so can you talk about, wow, almost a year, almost a year. So
Yeah.
can you talk about where DBOS comes into play, and how do you use DBOS as part of your architecture?
Right. So as part of the acquisition of all these data sources, we do a lot of scraping, as you can imagine. So part of that pipeline is there are a lot of kind of to dive in, there are a lot of data sets across a myriad of different websites, whether it's APIs, whether it's a PDF on a website, a file, a zip file that has 10 nested zip files. And we need to be able to handle, regardless of what we're scraping, handle the ingestion of that information and ultimately the cleaning of it, merging of it, and then the pushing of it out to a data warehouse. Uh, and so a lot of different types of workflows going on. So in terms of the workflows on the scraping side, we have to handle all of these various cases of different file types and finding of CSV headers. And we need to make sure also that all of this work gets done durably and that we don't have to keep retriggering all of these different tasks. It's a lot of work to make things item potent. So all of these workflows, we tested a bunch of different solutions, but what DBoss allows us to do is declare, hey, this is the scraping workflow, which feeds into the cleaning workflow, which then fans out across potentially hundreds of CSVs or PDFs that we're downloading and cleaning and extracting information from. And it's simply not it's not reasonable to try and do this sequentially. So the distributed fashion of DBoS is very appealing to us in that nature. And then also the workflows themselves are very versatile. So for instance, now while we don't always use them, only use them in our scraping pipeline, we also use them as part of our mapping pipeline, right? So if there's 300 files over time that existed and the columns shift over time,
Hmm.
as we're doing that column mapping, and we're using AI for some of that, we need to assist with that. We also need to ensure that all 200 of those jobs, when we're using new rules to map between those columns, we have a record for each of them. And doing that sequentially, especially with a user interacting with the front end, wouldn't make sense either. So we take advantage of DBoS there. And then lastly, on the data ingestion front, we take advantage of queues for our actual loading into our data warehouse. So with BigQuery, we need to make sure we're not loading more than one file into a table at a time. So we're able to kind of fan out across different queues
Hmm.
per table with I
Hmm.
believe with a partition key actually.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're doing a bit of, um, well, three phases sounds like you're describing, right? First, just pulling the data out from different websites, then mapping it and transforming, mapping of columns with AI, you mentioned, and then a queue to ingest into Bigtable, BigQuery. That
Yeah.
that sound about right? Um,
Yeah.
is that what you envisioned originally? Did you start out saying this is going to be our architecture, and is that what led you to DBoS to begin with?
So we ended up trying originally we thought, oh, someone must have solved this problem already.
Mm.
Um, and we were pleasantly surprised after trying many different vendors that none of them could end to end handle everything we needed. Some would handle around 20% of what we needed. Oh, we'll handle mapping for you. Oh, we'll handle scraping for you. But trying to connect all those disparate services and kind of um, put a square peg in a round hole wasn't really possible with the end to end orchestration that we needed. So ended up trying, or like trying is maybe the wrong word, but thinking about using Celery because I have a lot of experience from previous jobs working with Celery. Um, Thought of using Vercel, thought of or Render, and I was like, oh, we're going to set up tasks, and then I thought, wait, all right, now I need a Redis, and I thought it's kind of annoying that I need to invest in a piece of infrastructure that I'm only going to really use for this single use case, which is queuing. There's no point in setting up some durable queuing system like a Kafka or a Rabbit just to facilitate these tasks. And I really it was, I just thought, is there anything else that I could possibly use? And so I did some digging around. Temporal came up. I saw that in another previous job, and I thought, this is such a difficult thing to use, right? You have to commit fully to saying I'm going to write all my code in this specific way, and I thought this is not exactly what I'm looking for either. I'm looking for a little more ease of use. And then kind of like through the grapevine, I don't know if it was through either LinkedIn or just through searching and finding maybe on Hacker News, I found this durable queuing system DBOS, and I was like, what is this? Uh, and then got to playing with it and was just amazed at the ease and amazed at how much I didn't have to think about my queuing and job infrastructure.
Mm. So again, it seems to be about simplicity. Like for you in your specific case, building things quickly and being able to take a queue and just implement it in a couple of lines, is that what you were looking for, or is that something that helped you make the decision?
I mean, it wasn't just the queues. I think the queues in a way were like almost like icing,
Mm,
if you think about it. Because what I needed was, oh, we're gonna have scrapers go out. I need to be able to have multiple scrapers running at once. I need to know the set of things that they're scraping and how many can I scrape at once. And so I was able to see kind of at each step in the process, oh, here's another node, here's another node. How do I create composable infrastructure for myself around the natural Python code I would write without have to remake the wheel
mhm,
and rethink the whole thing around a specific piece of infrastructure. Because a
mm,
lot of the components in our system are very simple. It's only when you tie them all together do things become complex, especially when it comes to the orchestration. And it just simply wasn't achievable before I had started using DBoss.
mhm, mhm. Okay, and so you made the decision and you started building, and then how did that go? Did it go to plan? Was your initial impression, uh, did that turn out to be basically correct, or were there surprises or things you didn't expect along the way?
I'd say, I started using DBoss pretty early. Um, it was pretty yeah, I wouldn't say there was a learning curve, but, DBoss has its rules.
Mm,
So, if you make a workflow, you can't stick a step or transaction in one another. You've always got to call them from another workflow. And DBoss is very rigid about that. Also, too, there's a bit of a learning curve for us to setting up some of the testing infrastructure early on. Um, but once those things were in place, there were a lot of things I didn't have to think about anymore. So,
mm,
for example, I didn't have to think of setting up testing infrastructure for my Celery tasks. I didn't have to think of how am I going to mock this and that around the systems that exist. Things kind of just worked out of the box.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
And and if we could get back to salary actually for a second there, just for the sake of sort of playing devil's advocate, why not celery? What was missing there?
Yeah. So Celery's really great at scaling when you want to think about how it's scaling and you want to think about the loads that you're going to be dealing with and how they might be and this was at the time, when DBoS, had come out, was newer, really thinking about what specific tuning do I need to ensure things are going at the rate that I want them to.
Mm.
And this was a bigger problem at previous places that I had worked. But obviously, also too, this technology for DBoS technology didn't exist at the time, and it became really a familiarity thing, right? The devil is kind of the best thing. It was like, well, I'm familiar with Celery. This is the queuing infrastructure that I naturally should use. This is the documentation that is available to me that I'm familiar with.
Right.
So it was more of that and how I knew I could move quickly, versus trying a new piece of technology.
Mm-hmm. Right, right, right. So you're just saying you were familiar with Celery and then you tried DBoS.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what made you choose DBoS particularly?
So we're a small, tiny team, and it was very important to me that I could develop as quickly as possible without thinking about really anything other than
Mm,
my imagination and design.
mm,
Uh,
mhm,
if the idea now of using something like Celery almost scares me because I'd have to be thinking, oh, how is Redis the piece of infrastructure with the queuing? Do I now need to worry about that? Having fault tolerance and making sure if that breaks, that I have some way that my system is durable. Which is kind of like a whole can of worms. So I have to think about making sure I'm composing tasks in the Celery way.
right,
Um, I'd have to think of, well, what does testing look like for each of these tasks, and how do workflows work. So in the past, I had done fairly simple things with Celery, and to try and compose a system with Celery now, I really can't fathom what that fanning out of tasks would look like. What you know the idea of like, oh, I have a queue here. That's the scraping queue. This is the file processing queue. Each one's constrained in its own way. What does that look like in Celery?
mm,
Celery doesn't really. I mean, maybe it does now, but it didn't at the time have any sort of concept of queues.
mm. I see. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, and you're also running on DBoS Cloud, so you have Transact and cloud apps completely hosted on our infra. Um, with that in mind, what's your update, versioning, rollback, testing process like, and your CI/CD? What does that look like, and what's your impression?
Yeah. So right now, I'm very, very happy about our CI/CD because it's extraordinarily fast. Um, we have around 900 or 1,000 unit tests that we've written, and aside from that, the only gate between that and deploying is a single command that I got set up in my GitHub Actions to push to DBoS. I don't even really, it's been almost probably like 7 or 8 months since I've thought about actually how the deployment to DBoS works, which has been kind of incredible. I don't even think about it. I know it always takes maybe like a minute and 25 seconds because there's some weirdness with some of the packages we have, but otherwise, uh, it's very, very sleek and very, very fast. So in terms of like rolling back, simply just using, deploy PRs to get things out, um, and off of a staging branch into main, and it's just like it's like clockwork. If we need to roll back, we roll back. It's super simple. Just revert the PR.
Hmm, hmm. And what about versioning? Do you um, do any kind of workflow forking where if you have, let's say you're on some version, you have a bunch of workflows outstanding, um, and then it's time to do a deploy, let's say. And do you just sort of push the deploy button and let it go, or do you have any special flows around finding outstanding workflows, finding them, forking them on the new version, or if something's stuck, do you ever um, like change the code, fix a bug, and then use fork to promote to the latest? Have you done anything like that, or maybe not yet?
We haven't done anything like that quite yet. Um, I think we're currently at the point where we have 200 or 300 data sources And then from reliability perspective, we're a startup. It is an imperative that our workflows are forked to a new version. If anything, it's more important that we're aware of all of the workflows running when they need to run. So if one did have a bug, our current thesis and how we run is we just frankly end up canceling just because it's all internal facing. We don't have customers triggering a thing and then it's like, oh, we need to make sure their work gets done.
Hmm.
So we have a lot of flexibility there.
Hmm. Hmm. And to that point, actually, what about observability? I know you have in the cloud, we have console, we have dashboards. Did you set up a hotel export anywhere else? Do you have alerts?
So we haven't set up hotel exports anywhere else. We have been kind of using the DBOS Grafana dashboard, and it's been very helpful, especially from just like a scaling perspective, really helping us understand how many jobs do we have outstanding. Um, Also, too, outside of that, uh, DBOS makes available kind of like the workflow and queuing view, which has been immensely helpful of understanding why workflows might be stuck, and kind of helping debug there as well to cancel if one is causing kind of like a fill up of a queue and we don't know why.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. And you use a linked database, right? So your Postgres is your own, you're managing it, and you're linking that to DBoss Cloud.
Yes. Yeah. We're doing that for both our ingestion system and for our product.
Okay.
The two different.
And it's okay. And so do you have, do you use that Postgres for other purposes? Is it a shared Postgres or just separate, just for DBoss?
It's just for DBoS. It's I mean it's our app DB
Okay.
for each application.
Um, and what does scaling look like? Have you done scale tests? Do you envision potentially growing demands, or is that number of data sources growing over time? And how does scaling sort of fit into your DBoS story?
Yeah. So right now we kind of for business context, we have around 300 data sources, which means we have 300 scrapers and we have a monitoring system that's detecting changes across all of these different government sources and public sources of information. Right now, I think we're doing well, mainly because to be fair, a lot of these things don't update very frequently. We're talking
Mm,
once a week, once a month, once every quarter, annually. I think more of where we're going to see that is kind of like we were saying, as we add data sources, as users log into the platform, we're going to be eventually adding potentially alerts of when information comes out. Um, as we add more users, understanding the different notifications we're going to be sending out to folks, um, is it's there's definitely going to be some scaling challenges. I don't think anything too big. It's more that we know that DBoS will kind of like handle a lot of our a lot of the like the deep business logic workflows that we have. So if anything, it's more of like the scale of the development than it is the scale of the platform.
I see. I see. Okay. And so as you look at the rest of the year, the next few months, what does the roadmap look like? Where are you going next?
Yeah. So a few things. One, we're going to be adding more data sources. So more complex data sources, potentially private data sources. Um, So that's one thing we're going to be doing. The other thing is, we just did a demo of the product, but kind of over time, kind of over the next few weeks, addressing customer feedback, and beginning to kind of go out and to speak to more folks and customers that could possibly use the product, revamping it around documentation. So there's a documentation initiative that's in progress right now where we're going to be using DBoS as well as a lot of LLMs to go over all the analyses that we've done in order to document them kind of in a recursive way, going all the way down the lineage to the tables that we have. And that's also going to be a very big effort where we'll be deploying DBoS workflows actually to, figure out, oh, what are the column names? What do the analyses look like? Are we going to go and pull information from the source of the website in order to enrich the documentation that we make available to end users? So orchestrating those kind of like workflows as well so that customers actually know what they're looking at, why it's useful, why it's important, when it was last updated. And then finally, something we're very excited about kind of going into the new year is because we have all of this data and we've cleaned a lot of it, we're going to be able to make, I think, unlike a lot of other services, an actual AI chat interface where you can ask
Mm.
basic questions. You can say, "Oh, I'm looking for information about this, and I want to, how Humana trended over time." Because we have the exact data labeled in the way we need on sort of a very wide denormalized table with lots of different attributes for that company in terms of enrollment, in terms of their quality scores, and all of that by the government, we'll be able to answer questions very quickly that don't have you digging either through an element, but more importantly, don't have you digging through Excel sheets.
Mm, mm. Yes, I see. I see. Because if I were to ask ChatGPT that question now, it would do a web search, but it wouldn't be a rigorous analysis of numeric data. And that's,
Exactly. It would pull an article potentially that had updated 2 or 3 months ago to get you a piece of information, but
yeah.
it simply doesn't have the it's a lot of work, right? You gotta do this cleaning, you gotta do this merging, you have to know why you have to merge things, you have to know how they get merged, what source information is relevant, what data elements are actually important, uh, and so if that's all done already, you can get answers to people a lot more quickly if you have the context.
And so you're potentially looking at DBOS workflows that call out to LLMs and then call out to other sources and perform the entire interaction reliably. Is that what you're thinking about?
Exactly, with verified underlying data. So there's no question of like any sort of hallucination. It's simply performing a SQL query on very well labeled data.
Wow, that's great. Um, that sounds like a cool plan.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, I'm very excited.
So, as you move forward, what features do you think you'll need from us? What would be your feature requests, or what's on your wish list for what you need, and in Transact or cloud?
Yeah, I'd say the 2 at the top of my list, and it's one is from a place of, obviously a bit of selfishness too. One is it'd be really great, as DBoss is becoming more popular, that there's really easy plug and play kind of, as you mentioned, open telemetry connections to different platforms. And that's obviously easier said than done. Alex, you and I spoke about Logfire, about BetterStack, about a variety of them. Uh,
Mm,
I'm curious what kinds of client libraries could be built on top of some of these different services to make that easily plug and play. Um,
mhm.
so I think that would be very, very interesting. So maybe making the OTel process a bit simpler since folks are gonna ultimately need observability. Uh, so I'd say that's one piece on our end. And then another thing that you and I have talked about as well, my one of my favorite things about DBoss is actually that I don't have to also think about my API deployment in the cloud,
Mhm,
uh,
mhm,
which has been super amazing. Something we've been considering and that you and I have spoke about is potentially merging our product and ingestion systems with the idea that they could share resources, but at the same time, if we were getting a lot of load on our scraping, there are situations where potentially the API doesn't have enough time to spin up resources that are available, so they end up competing. It would be amazing to see sort of like an ability to split or reserve resources for some pieces of the application.
yeah, yeah. It's like it's a bit of a boundary question as far as do we want to take an app and define sub apps inside of it that have different resources assigned to them, or uh, it, put another way, do we want to have two apps that share some resources, or share a database, perhaps, right? Because the idea is we want to be able to share a database or share a schema, but have different performance boundaries or different performance classes so that the API is not affected by background processing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. I think the sub apps is interesting. I think the other statement you said is also very interesting of a way to, maybe it is technically two apps, all API and jobs end up being two tasks with separate defined resources since they are very distinct, but also pivotal to an application. You have your jobs, you have your API. Um,
Got it. Got it. Something for us to think about for sure. And can you tell me more about what the issue is with OTO? Like the uh, is the basic hotel export that we have. What's missing from that piece?
to be blunt, I think it's been more of a time thing.
Got it.
I know you sent me a few months ago. You sent me the hotel export, and I thought, all right, I'm going to have to actually sit down and look at this. Um, and
You
I've
need
been
to sit
no,
down
no,
and look at it. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I need
got
to
it.
sit
Got it.
down and look at it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, let me know. Let us know. Let us know what you think about that. Okay. So a couple of fun questions to wrap up. If somebody asks you, another engineer or a tech leader asks you, what's DPoS? What is it? How would you describe it?
I would describe DBOS as the platform that you wish you had like 3 or 4 years ago, that exists now. A lot of the folks I know, if you write Python, or TypeScript, in fact, anything, now that you guys support those languages, there's really a question of, do you have durable tasks that you need done, or even tasks to begin with?
Mhm.
Um and do you potentially, even if you don't, do you have an API that you're thinking of just like spinning things up on with minimal decoration and minimal thought? I would just say you need to take a look at this platform. A lot of the orchestration, um, a lot of the scaling and resourcing that you'd normally think about, you just don't even need to do. A lot of the CI/CD stuff that you'd normally have to do, you don't need to do. You don't need to learn how lambdas work. You don't need to learn what Redis is in terms of how it connects to Celery. You don't have to think. If you want to just go, you should probably be using DPlus.
I think that's I well, very well put. Very well put. And finally, tell me about where people can find you and Soria online and on socials.
Yeah. So we actually just added a LinkedIn page, Soria Analytics LinkedIn page. If you haven't seen that, you can also check out soriaanalytics.com. And if you're interested in talking to us, you can reach out to us there.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again about DBoss very soon. Pleasure and an honor to work with you.
It's great chatting, Alex.